Hey everybody, Connor here. Today I want to talk about my rudder pedals because I finally got some finished. So as a preface to this discussion, one of the things that I really love about a plans-built airplane is that if you make a mistake, it's really cheap just to go make another part. If you mess up a part in a kit-built airplane, then you have already shipped the kit, which is very expensive just to ship it. So one of the nice things about a plans-built airplane, if you mess up a part, you just make another one. You pay for it in raw materials. So for an example of that, I completely messed up one of my spar caps. I had to rebuild the spar for one of the wings because my extrusions had gotten a little bit bent, and it wasn't a big deal at all. You know, it's unfortunate. You don't enjoy going back and remaking a part because it takes time, but it's not that difficult. It's not a big deal. So another example of this is I am a terrible welder. I have a cheap Harbor Freight TIG welder, so I've been, I've done stuff before. I'm not very good, and came time to do the rudder pedals. And so here's, I marked it 1. This was my first attempt. One of the things I did with this, you can see there's way too much. So there are lots of problems with this. When you weld 4130, typically you want to use the -80, and this is the regular -70, which is what you typically use on something like mild steel. And there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, a lot of people will tell you that nowadays we've pretty much, smart people, as they say, smart people have run the test and found that there's not really discernible difference. What I found moving to Gen 2, which does have it, I'll talk about that in a second, is that it's much easier to work with. So for somebody who's not very good, it definitely flows a lot better. So problem number 1, using the wrong kind of filler material. Problem number 2, there is way too much material. The reason why there's way too much material is because I use what was in stock, which was too thick of a rod. So using a finer rod for this fine tubing, you want some smaller stuff. I forgot the sizes. I think it's, 3/32, 1/16, something like that, tiny. So this is way too much filler. And the third problem is that it's cold. There's not enough heat on this. I don't want to say it's tricky to weld. The rudder pedal is interesting because Dave just uses probably whatever he had in his shop. That's why everything is what it is. This is 120 thousandths wall. This centerpiece is 58 thousandths wall. So there's a huge difference, and it's really easy to melt this piece, and it's hard to get enough heat on this piece. So the important thing is when you're doing something like this, you want your heat on the thicker piece. You want that heat on the larger wall. So I ran into the problem where I was melting everything away up here because I wasn't paying attention to where I applied my heat, and it was still too cold. Truth be told, I did this because that was my dad's advice, and dads are smart, but they're not always 100% right. Sometimes just looking up and starting with the textbook and working off of there is a good idea. So let's look at generation 2. So here it's marked with a 2 for generation 2, and this looks a lot better. It's not amazing. I mean, it's okay. And you can see, yeah. So what's wrong with this? Well, I moved to the -80, like I said. So this is true filler material, what you're supposed to use for 4130. And honestly, that really doesn't look terrible. You can see it looks fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this part. And this one actually was the best in terms of my machining on the lathe and the mill. I actually got this closest to perfect center, so that was wonderful. And I thought, let's do one more run because I wasn't paying attention and I forgot to apply gas when I started, and then I left a boo-boo, and I was like, oh man, I really don't like that. So let's go with number 3. So 3 is final, and it's already in primer because as soon as I did it, I said, good enough, let's take it. And I mean, it's hard to tell, and the lighting in here is terrible, but it's good enough. This is perfectly reasonable. I'm satisfied. Now, one thing I want to note is this isn't powder coated. This is just a primer. And the reason why that is because I happen to know somebody who works for a company that makes seats for airlines. So they work in aviation. They have a saltwater testing environment to prove to the FAA that they meet corrosion resistance minimums. They were curious one day, so they tried Rust-Oleum primer and compared it to zinc chromate. Zinc chromate, it's not the best. It meets FAA minimums, though, and that's all that matters. And so one day they decided to test Rust-Oleum, and they found out that it meets FAA minimums. And truth be told, I'm not saying it's better than zinc chromate. I'm not saying it's worse than zinc chromate, but it meets FAA minimums. So that's what I use. Honestly, this is a flat black primer from Rust-Oleum. What I use typically on any of the aluminum surfaces is the Rust-Oleum self-etching primer. I started with the Napa brand. What was it called? Seymour? I can't remember the name, but it's the Napa. And it's okay. Rust-Oleum has the nicer spraying mechanism. They've got it figured out, so it has better application at all angles if you have to get in a tight corner. But I just wanted to show you a little bit of practice goes a long way, and it may never be perfect, but it meets minimums, and that there's nothing structurally wrong with this part. The steel is going to fail before the weld fails, and that's what's important. So I'll see you later, and thanks for watching. Bye.